19-year-old boy from Minnesota who died face down in a pool of blood on Omaha Beach. Who would you rather be, people? It is not enough to be a good person. We are supposed to be courageous people. The Bible tells us that Gideon's army, David versus Goliath, live not by fear. Be courageous. It's all through the Bible because courage is proof of faith. You look at your Old Testament, you look at your founding fathers, folks. You had a bunch of farmers and blacksmiths and fishermen with squirrel rifles went up against the world's greatest military empire. How crazy were they, people? Now all they had was this wacky idea that had never been tried. That man's rights come from God, not from government. And they fought the British for year after year, and they were almost defeated. Almost defeated. And George Washington went down to Valley Forge, and he prayed, and he got up and took that ragtag army and took out the British at Yorktown. Big surprise attack. Turned the whole war. Think of the miracles that were in that revolution, folks. The famous fog that came down on New York Harbor just in time to save George Washington's army. The bullets went through George Washington's hat but never through him. There was providence there, folks, but was that providence earned? Did people have to sweat blood to make it happen? Did people have to risk their lives? Well, we are in the same position today that the German Christians were, folks. We're on the verge of tyranny. We're on the verge of war, on the verge of chaos, and it all depends on us. Right here, that we stand up. God showed you, you don't have to have everybody, you just have to have a few courageous, faithful people, and He will spare a city or a land. There's many examples of that. Just have to have a few, but we have to be that few. That's our calling, that's our time. I'm asking you to fight, people. I'm asking you to fight for your kids and for your country. Are there anything more important to you than that? Your children and your country? I'm asking you to fight, and it's not easy taking on the county commission. It's not easy putting all your money into a scoreboard race. It's not easy being unpopular with some of the local political hierarchy. It's not easy taking on some of the Muslim community around here. It ain't easy. But it's a heck of a lot easier than charging Nazi bullets on the beaches of Normandy, isn't it? Is it a little bit easier? Yeah. So this is where we're at, people. We have a choice. We stand up in faith and courage, and if enough of us stand up, maybe God says, this nation is worth saving. I believe that will happen. I believe President Trump's election happened with divine providence. But how many people had to work their little butts off to make it happen, folks? People had to sweat blood to make that happen. But when we sweat blood, miracles happen. So this is what I'll say, folks. We're in a pretty tough time. We are. But you're in the freedom movement, and you meet the very best people in America. And if you dedicate yourself to saving this nation, to honouring your God, to saving your faith, if you commit yourself to that, two things may happen. One, you may give it everything you've got for what you believe. And maybe we lose. Maybe. But all of us will earn the right to look our children in the eye and say, I did everything I possibly could for you. And on the day of account, we get to stand up and say, I was a good and faithful servant. Is there anything more worth striving for than those things, folks? No. In 100 years' time, is anything else going to matter? No. And if we win this, and I believe we can win this, I don't think God is finished with this country yet by a long way. We win this, we will spark a liberty boom, not just in this country, inspiring it out of this state, Well, we'll spark liberty booms all over the world. We'll put the dictators on the run. We will set the stage for a worldwide spiritual revival. And all of us will earn the right to pass on to our children not just the amazing country that you were born into and I came to, but one even greater, one that may lead the world in liberty and prosperity and faithfulness for hundreds of years into the future. It's just the chance of that worth a little sacrifice, folks.
Yeah.
So I want to say to all of you, thank you so much for what you do for America, for liberty, for my country, for your kids and my kids. God bless America, God bless Minnesota, and God bless every single one of you. Thank you so much.
Does anyone have any?
Do we want to do a couple of questions, or have
Sure.
I gone a bit too long for that? Maybe one or two questions? Yes, sir.
Sir, what is your opinion of the John Birch Society?
The John Birch Society. I've been getting John Birch literature since the 1970s in New Zealand, and it really did shape a lot of my understanding. I regard the John Birch Society as sort of the special forces of the freedom movement. So, yeah, I have a very high opinion. And I know there's chapters in this area. If you're not involved, it'd be a good thing to take a look at, absolutely. Yes, sir.
What's your opinion on what's happening with Ukraine and Russia? I know, like, Amy Klobuchar and all these
Yeah.
other bad senators were pushing this revolution in Ukraine years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, well, look, I'm at odds with many of my colleagues on this. Look, I'm all in for Ukraine, and I'll tell you why. Okay. Vladimir Putin's tanks in the occupied territories are flying the hammer and sickle. The occupied republics of Luhansk and Donetsk are openly communist now. They are people's republics. Vladimir Putin organised an international gathering of 30,000 young communists in October 2017 from all over the world to celebrate the Bolshevik Revolution. Vladimir Putin is the direct ally of Xi Jinping. He is working with Xi Jinping to take down the US dollar and set the stage for World War III, which he runs. Now, see, Biden and the Democrats are pretending to help Ukraine. The very first shipment of weaponry to Ukraine was pistol ammunition. He has slow-walked every single thing he can. Biden's goal is to string out Ukraine as long as he can. If they win, he will take credit. If they lose, he will blame the Republicans. I don't buy a lot of the narrative that is out there about Ukraine, that Ukraine is hopelessly corrupt, that it's all about the biolabs. I can rebut every single one of those things. But I'll just say this. Do millions of Americans believe that President Trump is a fascist? Not you guys. Do millions of other Americans believe that President Trump's a fascist?
They don't know what a fascist is.
I know, but this is what they believe, right?
Yeah.
Is this true or not?
Yeah.
Do millions of Americans believe that Donald Trump tried to stage an insurrection after the election?
Yes.
Yes.
They do. Do millions of Americans believe that Donald Trump called Mexicans rapists and murderers?
Yes.
See, none of these things are true, right?
Right.
But millions of Americans believe it. Why? Because of communist propaganda. So millions of Americans believe that Putin is a Christian even though he supports communism. Millions of Americans believe that Ukrainians are Nazis. Millions of Americans believe that it was all America's fault that Putin had to invade. This is all the same propaganda, people. This is all the same thing. You understand what is happening with the propaganda in this country, how Republicans are now Nazis, Conservatives are basically fascists, everybody on the right's a racist. You understand that's all propaganda. Do the Russians not have a very strong interest in spreading the same propaganda against their enemies in Ukraine? They've been doing it for a long time. The Russians were kicked out of Ukraine in 2014 in the Maidan, and that was not a CIA operation. That was Vladimir Putin, that was the Russian head of Ukraine saying, we are not going to deal with the West. Vladimir Putin told me I have to deal with Russia. The people rose up and threw him out. And Putin has been after them ever since. And I'll tell you this, the minute Ukraine falls, what do you think is going to happen if it falls? Putin has already threatened the Baltic states. He's already destabilizing Moldova. He has already threatened to reconquer East Germany. He has already threatened Japan. And they've already threatened to reoccupy Alaska. Do you think, because Alaska was only leased, you see, it wasn't actually sold. So do you think if Ukraine falls, the world's going to be a happier place?
No.
We are going to see total war in Europe with nuclear weapons. We're going to see a mass invasion of the Middle East by Iran. We're going to see attacks on the Far East, Hawaii and the West Coast by China. And North Korea is going to invade South Korea. The only thing that's stopping World War III now is Ukraine. And millions of Americans are cheering on our enemy and denigrating those who should be our allies. The Ukrainian people. Putin is using Putin the Christian is using Muslim troops to rape and slaughter and torture Ukrainian Christians and Jews. And we got millions of Americans supporting Putin doing this. So I can see a lot of nodding of the heads here. I knew this would be controversial. But I have done lots of research on this, folks. And I'm telling you what, if we let Ukraine fall, we are going to have World War III. Tucker Carlson will tell you if we support Ukraine, we get World War III. The first step in World War III was the attack on Ukraine. You know, why did Vladimir Putin attack Ukraine when he did? He attacked Ukraine at a very bad time. Because he attacked a little late, because the ground was frosty in Ukraine. And he should have driven his tanks in then, because he could have driven right across all the fields. But he waited until the fields were muddy, so he could only drive up the roads, and the Ukrainians hammered them from each side. Why did he delay? Because he had to wait for his friend Xi to finish the Olympics. No, all this sort of, well, he can't defend Ukraine because that will drive Russia into the hands of China. Russia and China have been military allies since 2001. They held the world's biggest military exercise in 2018 outside St. Petersburg, Zapad 18, the world's biggest ever exercise, and it was all about nuclear war against the United States. So there's massive propaganda out there, folks, and we have to be very, very discerning right now, because if we make the wrong decision here, we're going to be in war like we've never seen before. Yes, ma'am.
Where would World War III, what country would it intake? Where would it happen?
All over, the whole northern hemisphere. The Russians have got nuclear weapons in Nicaragua right now and bombers ready to launch on this country. Right? It's going to be here.
So it's going to be a big eruption all over the country,
all over the northern hemisphere.
Northern?
Yeah. Well, some of the southern, but mainly the northern. See, they've been planning. Look, I had a friend of mine knows a Russian military intelligence officer who defected in 2000. And he was at a big meeting with a whole bunch of top brass in America one day. And all these Americans were saying, oh, Russia would never attack America because look at all the environmental degradation it would cause. It would kill all the seals and the whales and melt the glaciers, and it would be horrible for the environment. And this Russian general, top man of military intelligence, said to them, are you people normal? Are you people normal? I spent my entire career in the Russian military. This is under Yeltsin and Putin, preparing for a nuclear attack on the United States. That was all we practiced for. Yes.
Hi. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for coming. Everybody that's here, our steps are ordered. And so I would just, whatever in your heart, do it to help fight what's going on here. My question is when it comes to the youth, what have you seen that works at a local level to get them involved?
Yeah, very good question. Well, you got to have your Republican clubs going at all the colleges and youth clubs. You know, the youth love Dennis Prager. They love Turning Point USA. They love Charlie Kirk. They love Jordan Peterson. They are more of a conservative generation than their parents were. What they're lacking is leadership. What they're lacking is courageous politicians who they want to rally behind. Young people loved Ronald Reagan. Young people loved Ron Paul. Young people loved Donald Trump because they were seen as courageous politicians. So if you want young people to be involved, you have to be very courageous, you be very vocal in your community, you have to address their issues, internet privacy, jobs, the political correctness they see, the suppression they see. If you go to a university and say, young people here, if you get me elected as state rep, I'm going to make it a big issue to defund this university if they don't stop suppressing your freedom of speech. If they don't start firing some of your communist professors, you'll get young people supporting you if you do that kind of thing. You stand up for the Second Amendment, you'll get young people supporting you. You stand up for religious liberty. They know their future is bleak right now. And they're worried because there's nobody fighting back. They want to get behind leaders. And so that's what I would say. The same way you get older people, you stand up, address their issues, you go to them and say, I am going to stop the perverts in your schools. I am going to protect your freedom of speech. I am going to make sure you live free. That's how you get young people involved. You know, they want the truth. They want courage. They don't want wimps. They don't want to join the country club. They want to live a free life. Yes.
I want to make sure that you understand that in Minnesota we already have a process by which the grassroots picks the candidates.
So you're talking about
The caucus.
The caucus. Oh no, so you have some primaries, you have some caucus.
The caucus determines who the endorsed Republican will be.
Yeah, but that's not the same thing.
I'm not saying it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But there is no obstacle to anyone going to the caucus.
Yeah,
If you
absolutely.
take over the caucus, you take over the body that will endorse the candidates.
Yeah. But it's not the endorsement, it is the voting when you're in the election.
No Republican candidate endorsed in this state has lost a primary except one from the right. Because we have the rhinos that don't want the conservative voice to be heard. The only way to
Sure.
win that is to participate in the process by starting at the caucus.
Look, caucus system, in Iowa they have just about a whole caucus system. I think the caucus system is the best, but you still have primaries. And I do not believe that.
You're not listening.
I am listening, 100%.
I moved to Minnesota in 1976.
Yeah.
In 1978, we had what was called the Minnesota Miracle, out of the stupidity of the left and their arrogance. The caucus system was alive and well, and an endorsement meant the grassroots picked. In the time period involved between 78 and today, less and less people have engaged in that caucus system.
Yeah.
What we have to do is use what we have available to us. In order to do what you proposed, it would require that the state legislature, not the party, the state legislature would have to change the state law. The
Sure.
way to change the state law is to get conservatives elected. To get them elected,
Sure.
they have to be endorsed. They have to drive out the rhinos and make sure that the conservative voice is the voice that gets elected.
Yeah, well, look, I agree that if I was going, I would just have a caucus system and that would be it. But in some states you can change the primary system just at the REC level. As I said, I don't know what the procedure is at this state. But the ideal is you do both. You have a caucus system and you close your primaries. Because I'm a little bit sceptical that only one Republican has, look, in some areas the Republican endorsement is not conservative too. So you've got two things.
That's our fault.
Yeah, I know it is. And the caucus is a great grassroots thing, and people should be involved in that, just like everybody should be precinct delegates. In some states, they have no caucus at all, and it's only primaries, like Florida, and it's essential then that you close your primaries. I think it's great that you should get more people in the caucus, but I think you should still be trying to, well, as you say, when you get enough conservatives in, close the primaries, because that'll be a double whammy, that'll be doubly safe. And you're 100% right. So thanks for giving me more background on the situation in the state.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
That comes from a PhD who spent 39 years at a public university and was elected president of the faculty as an openly conservative Republican.
Yeah, well, there's always a few, and I'm glad, wish there was more, but yes.
I just want to make sure. There's a myth out there. I'm sitting with a colleague from that very same institution, and there's another one in the room. Where's Jeff? There's Jeff Johnson. So part of that mythology is it's not a hopeless case among the faculty.
Yeah.
There are conservatives.
Yeah, it's not a hopeless case anywhere. It's just not enough people are involved because they don't see the urgency, and political parties often don't recruit enough, and legislators sometimes aren't brave enough to inspire the people. It all comes back to our side ultimately. Yes, ma'am.
Back to Ukraine for a moment. This is
Sure.
a quick question. Because it's dear to my heart. President Trump has said more than once, if he would be president now, Putin would not have invaded Ukraine. I believe that true or false.
Absolutely.
In your opinion.
Well, this is the thing. Who was Ukraine's biggest champion while Trump was in power? Which president in the last 20 years has done more to help Ukraine than any other? President Trump. He gave them missiles. He knew that what Putin was going to do. See, while Trump was in power, Putin was in his box, Xi was in his box, Iran were in their box, the southern border was relatively secure, and Rocket Boy was in his box. So what's happened? What has changed? We have a traitor in the White House now, so all the bad guys are going on the march. What would you do if you're a bad guy? You know, this is so absolutely, none of this would be happening. Look, President Trump was working with Japan and Australia and Taiwan and India to basically freeze out the CCP. He was going to do to the CCP what Reagan did to the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. He would have brought them down. And you imagine the boon to the world that would have been. A free China with all of that energy and all that industry actually working for the common good rather than working for evil. So yeah, the elections have impacts, people. And allowing cheating has impact. So, yeah, you know, people who say don't defend Ukraine, Trump was the biggest defender of Ukraine we ever had. And that's a fact. You can check that out anytime.
He got impeached once because of that.
Well, yeah, I know.
That perfect letter.
Yeah, I know. So maybe one more question.
Right here.
Yes, ma'am.
Question for probably people in the audience more than for you, sir. It's my understanding that you mentioned school boards, that as of the last week or so, our governor and his compadres in the legislature now have it so that you don't have to worry about a referendum anymore. They now, at the school board level, can extend the last referendum you voted on for the same amount of time and the same amount of money. So we don't have to worry about balancing the budgets. The school board is going to do it on their own. And our governor has changed the social studies standards, the math standards, and the teacher licensure standards. But in the last week or so, he now has said that he will have critical race theory, DEI, and SEL in every subject area, pre-K through 12, and it must occur. And he will tell the school what they must teach, and it's no longer going to be determined by the school board.
Well, let's see, this is the thing, you know, when Republicans had control of the legislature, what did they do to clean up the curriculum?
Nothing.
Nothing. So now it's at the point where it's virtually impossible to clean it up, and now they're going full on communist. So this is what happens. We elected Republican representatives who could have done something and just weren't brave enough to do it, or didn't see the urgency of it. But we still need this. We still need whatever gaps we can find in the education, whether it's homeschooling, whatever, people have to get up and make a stand on this. Say, Governor Walsh, you can do all you like, but we're not going to adopt this in our school. What are you going to do? Are you going to put us in jail? Maybe that's what will have to happen.
He did.
Well, he would, but wouldn't that look great? Who's willing to go to jail for that? You know?
I think
Wouldn't it be worth it, if you want to go to jail for something in your life, standing up for your kids' future should be one of them. So, I think it would be better call it quits. People got to get home and watch TV. But I just want to say, I'm very grateful to be invited to speak to you tonight. I hope you'll consider the points I've made. Do your own research. Get the books. You'll find that, put it this way, I stand by my material. Enemies within the church will blow you away about the Marxism in the churches. Security risk senators expose 30 senators. The House Un-Americans is a series that's going to expose 100 Congress members. You know, you don't come to a foreign country and criticise and accuse half their leaders of being traitors without a little bit of information to back it up. So that's what I do. I've been doing this for 10 years. They haven't called me out yet. If you really want to know your enemy and how they work. See, what I do too, when I do a chapter on Amy Klobuchar, I don't just say she was born there, she grew up, she went to school. I give the whole background of the movement round her. You know, because communism has denominations like Christianity does. You have Trotskyists, you got Maoists, you got Stalinists, you got Social Democrats, and they all your leaders come from these different strands. And you know, if you're gonna win a war, you have to know your enemy. If you don't understand your enemy, you're wasting your time. Most Americans still don't know Obama's a communist. Do they? Most Americans most Minnesotans have no idea that Amy Klobuchar is a communist. Most of them have no idea that pro-Chinese Maoists were behind the George Floyd riots.
American Marxists.
Most of them have zero idea of this. So how are you supposed to do anything about it when you don't even understand it? The first thing the left does is what they call power mapping. When they go into a town, they put a big map up on the wall, and they put all the power centres, the businesses, the police, all the city councillors, all the school board people, and they say, how are we going to take this over? Well, we got an ally there, we got an enemy there, we got a friend there. This guy can be influenced. This guy, we can get some dirt on him. And they go into the town and they do this power map and they take out their enemies and they elevate their friends. And that's how they take over a town or a foundation or a union or whatever they do. When you're here, you're going to look at, do power maps on the left. What's Blandon doing in your town? What's the DSA chapter doing in your town? Who are the leading Democrats? Who are they working for? Which communists are they involved with? You've got to do the same thing that they do if you're going to have any chance of taking them out. Because they have to operate under cover of darkness. We operate out in the open. They have to be slimy little rats, and we have to shine a light on them, but we have to understand who they are. Most people in Minnesota have no idea who DSA is. Most Republicans in the state have no idea who DSA is, who Freedom Road Socialist Organisation is. They have no idea that Blandon is a malevolent force. They happily take their money. So we need to, for lack of vision, without information, the people perish. And we have to educate ourselves. And I proudly say my staff will educate you better than almost anything you'll find out there. So again, I want to thank you so much. I want to come back to a free Minnesota and do lots of fishing and grouse hunting, and really I love this state. It's a great state. Don't leave it. Stay here and fight for it. It's a great place.
Hello everyone, Pete Wilson. A couple things. Trevor will be at the back selling books and the DVDs. Please